Join us now on Flickr at flickr.com/groups/art-of-photography. Welcome back to the Art of Photography, everybody. My name's Ted Forbes here, and we've been away for a few weeks. I've been off doing some documentary work, but we're back for a whole new season of episodes and some really cool things in store. Today what I want to talk about is a concept called tethered shooting. Now, what is tethered shooting and why would you care? Well, it's a technique that a lot of professional photographers use in studio. Now, think of it this way. I'm going to use, for my example here today, a Nikon D40, which is a pretty basic, very inexpensive camera. And especially if you're shooting on this type of camera, if you're doing a lot of studio work, things like that, you've got the crop factor involved and you've got kind of a dinky viewfinder here. And even if you take the picture and then view it back on the screen, it's still hard to see the level of detail that you need to get really critical results. And by critical, I mean things like little adjustments in lighting, making sure your focus is dead on, all those kinds of things. Now, if you're doing studio photography, being able to tether your camera to a computer and see these images full screen allow you to make those adjustments on the fly. Now, what we're going to use today, we're going to go in the studio in just a second. I'm going to show you my setup. But this is a very inexpensive solution to tethered shooting because I kind of want to make the point, once again, like I do a lot, that it has nothing to do with the gear that you're working with. It has more to do with how you know how to make do with that gear. So what we're going to do today is we're going to use the Nikon D40, and then I'm going to tether this to my my Apple laptop using a piece of free software called Tethered, and I'll give you the link to that. And what we're going to do is show you how to tether this to the computer and how to use your computer monitor to view your shots. So let's go on into the studio and we'll take it from there. Okay, moving over into the studio right now, what I want to do is kind of show you our little table setup and what we're working on here, the subject and kind of the equipment that we're going to use to get this shot. Okay, first off, one thing I want to show you here is we're going to be shooting our subject here, which is an old 1950s Bakelite Kodak Brownie. It was kind of a Holga-esque kind of camera that was popular, like I said, back in the 50s. It's got a meniscus lens, all that kind of cool stuff. But we're not shooting on it today. We're just going to use it as our subject. And I've got this just on a basic piece of white poster board here, just because I don't want the table underneath as a background. We're just going to keep it white and simple. Also, let me show you the lighting that we're using, which is very simple as well. Okay, for lighting, what we're using here is a very simple setup. We're not using a strobe light for this. I'm going to use continuous lighting. It means it doesn't flash. It's a high wattage bulb that just operates continuously through this diffusion box that we're using. Now, this is a very simple setup. It's a Lowell Tota lamp, which is a high wattage bulb. These are good because mainly we're doing video right now, so it's easier to do than dealing with strobes. And then this is a diffusion umbrella, not a softbox, but basically it's just an umbrella made out of this diffusion material. I'm going to project the light through it, and it's going to get rid of a lot of the harshness that sometimes you associate with really bright directional lighting. So it's going to soften that up, soften the shadows, and give us a nice ambience to deal with. Okay, so let's talk about the settings on the Nikon D40 that we're going to use here. And if you have a Nikon camera, you'll probably have something very similar to how you want to set this up. We're going to go ahead and hit the menu button here. And what we're going to do is, if you're not already there, what you want to do is go down and make sure you have the, use the scroll wheel here. If you get the wrench selected, this is the setup menu for the camera. First option here is USB. We're going to say select OK. And you have two choices. There's mass storage. If you have mass storage selected, this enables your camera to act basically like a disk drive. So I can plug this into my computer and I can basically pull the photos off any way that I want. Okay, but what we want to do is we want to tether the camera. So we don't want the computer to see the storage, see the camera's storage. We want to see it and communicate with it. And I just lost it. Sorry, talking too much. So what we're going to do is, once you've selected USB, is go ahead and select this MTP PTP. Okay, this is going to allow your computer to, via USB, talk to the computer, the camera on the computer. So we'll go ahead and say OK, and we are now ready to go. Now, when I plug the Nikon D40 into the computer, Tethered will see it. Okay, one other thing you might want to note as far as settings go is that Tethered works. You can certainly shoot your camera in any of the modes, but one of the great things about Tethered is it allows you to control your aperture and your shutter speed, white balance, all that directly from the computer. So a couple things that I'll do is, first of all, go ahead and set my settings. I'll just click this over and select manual, and that'll allow me to override all the camera settings from the computer now. And the other thing I'll do is go ahead and deselect autofocus. I would rather do this manually for now, because we're going to see each picture as we take it, so it's going to allow us to make adjustments as necessary. So those are the two things I would get set up on the camera and get ready to go on that. Okay, so let's take a look at the Tethered build interface here. I've got Tethered build open on my computer here, and we're all set up and ready to go. Before you get started, I think one thing that's kind of important is to go under the Tethered build menu at the top and go down to Preferences. Okay, so Command, comma, if you prefer hotkeys. One thing you want to make sure is by default, and I've changed mine, it says Save Captured Pictures to, and you're going to tell it where to save these. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to use your camera. It won't save any images on your SD card on your camera. It's just going to go direct to your computer, which is very cool, actually. But anyway, it's a good idea. It defaults to your pictures folder. But I'm going to say desktop. Let's go ahead and say other, and let's create a new folder, and we'll say podcast. And basically it's going to put our images in that folder, so I know where they are. You can also adjust the naming format with extension here if you want to do sequences, things like that. The sequences are important because when we get into time-lapse photography, you're going to want to use a program to sew the whole thing together, and usually they're required for image sequences. So anyway, you can also select to import it into an application if you want to use iPhoto or Lightroom or Aperture or something like that. I typically don't. We're just going to leave it for here. So anyway, we're good to go there. Let's go ahead and close the preferences window here, and basically you've got the icons at the top here. This is this is just to take a picture. So this is the fire button, basically. To the right of that, this is a timer button. So if you're going to go run and get in the shot, you might want about 5 or 10 seconds before the camera fires so you can get over there and get in it. You can also do bracketing, and we'll talk about this in a second. This is a little more advanced topic, but it's very cool. It allows you to make several exposures that vary, and you can bring them back in as an HDR image, or if you want, just make sure you have the right image. So anyway, that's what bracketing does. We'll talk about that later on. And then finally, after that, you've got your controls here for time-lapse shooting, and we'll talk about that in the next podcast. Right now, you can see it's giving me some statistics here as I move across. My lens that I've got, here's it's the AFS 18 to 55 lens. My focal length right now is set to 55 millimeters. Focus is manual focus. Exposure is 0 EV. I've got everything in manual mode, so we're going to be working with that. I'll show you. And then finally, you've got your battery indicator over here. I'm running on 35% battery here, so I know that I probably need to power up soon, or if I'm going to do a time lapse, I definitely need to recharge. Down at the bottom of the screen here, here's where you have your drop-down menus. So if I click to the right of any of these, I can change the shutter speed. I've synced up with 1/30th of a second here. I can change this all the way up to 30 seconds or do bulb exposures, which is very nice. Aperture, I have control over the aperture, and it updates according to where my lens is set. Right now, best I can do is 5.6 on the tight end, and I can go all the way down to 36 on the low end. The white balance here I've set to incandescent because I just happen to know this is incandescent lighting. If I go to auto, sometimes it may be a little off, and we'll talk about that in a second. Over here, flash I'm not using. ISO is set to 200. Since I'm doing studio work here, I'm going to keep this set as low as possible so I can get the cleanest image as possible. I don't want a lot of noise in this image. Finally, the quality control, I can go in here and I can select RAW or JPEG Basic. I'm just going to leave this in JPEG Normal for right now. We're going to shoot large size, and then you can also, we're not worrying about the metering matrix, or metering, this is set to matrix metering, but I have everything set to manual right now, so I'm overriding whatever kind of metering. This is if you're metering with your camera. You can select the mode that you're going to meter in, whether it be spot, center, or matrix. So anyway, good stuff. So basically, we've got everything set up, and when you're ready to take the picture, you just come up here and hit the fire button. You'll hear the shutter crank, and there it is, lo and behold, the Brownie Hawkeye. Now, one thing I'm noticing already, and I know that we're probably going to lose some of this in translation from the color shift from a screenshot into video, but this is a little yellow. Nikon tends to white balance things automatically a little on the yellow side. It's not disturbing or annoying or anything like that, but maybe I want to go down here under white balance and set this specifically to incandescent, and this will shift to the tungsten lighting that I've got. Let's go ahead and take another picture. And you can see that maybe almost made it too blue. So maybe you'd have to experiment with this, but maybe the other one was right. Now, if you really want to get professional results on this, what you would want to do is use a photo where you're going to take a picture of either just a white sheet or a gray card, something like that, and you can customize your white balance. But this looks pretty good. This is a little more true than the yellow was, and this gives me something to work with, especially if I'm going to use post-processing at all, either in Photoshop or Aperture, something like that. But anyway, one of the great things about this, there's a couple things. if you're doing pictures for a living, you're shooting for a catalog, something like that, this allows you to get really anal retentive and see things in the shot that you're probably not going to see in your viewfinder, because it gives me a full screen to do this in. Okay, so for instance, one thing that I might not notice just using the viewfinder on the camera that I'm certainly noticing here is I can see the umbrella reflecting in the little piece of plastic up here. Okay, so maybe that's something I want to get rid of. What I'm going to have to do is readjust my lighting, but I caught that. A lot of times if you're not using tethered shots or a way to monitor and track, that's something that you know, just your viewfinder, especially in a D40, is so small it's really hard to pick that out. The other thing is focus. This focus looks pretty good. I'm kind of doing a macro thing, so my depth of field is going to be pretty shallow, which is fine. I don't mind some of this blowing out, but if you want a really sharp image, I would need to change my aperture down to, you know, especially for macro, down to probably f16 or 22, somewhere in there. But anyway, another thing, I'm sitting right next to the light right now. I'm going to show you how we can radically change the lighting. I'm going to move this over and back just a little bit. So you're going to see in this next picture, just look at the reflections of light on the camera, and you're going to see there's a big difference here. So let's go ahead and take the picture. And you can see everything shifted. It's more black now because I moved the light out of range a little bit. Actually, it's not bad because it didn't unlight it, but it just reflects off the bakelite finish on this camera a lot less. So anyway, this was what makes it really nice. Put it back so you can see the difference here again of being able to see exactly what you're getting, move things around, etc. If you're doing catalog work professionally, or you're doing anything like that, most of these guys do shoot on this kind of setup, and the client will often come over and be part of the shoot and help art direct. This is kind of depends on who your client is, but this can sometimes be a little bit of a pain, but it is kind of becoming the standard of how photographers operate. But anyway, it's basically, it gives them the ability to call as they see it. So if something's not quite right, they can tell right there on the shoot, rather than having to spend more money to have you reshoot it later. This tends to work in everybody's favor. Keeps your clients happy, keeps the money coming in, and keeps your bills paid. So, and like I said, most professional photographers are not using freeware and a $400 camera. But my point of using these in this podcast are showing you that it's not about you know, how much money you've sunk into gear to get great photos. You can do it with tools that are out there that you know, are a lot more affordable and less expensive. But anyway, it does, you know, if you were shooting a professional situation, if you want to get bigger clients, you need to be shooting on more professional work. But anyway, you can see right now here that, I mean, this is something, you know, you couldn't have done 10 years ago for this little amount of money. And it's a very handy tool to go ahead and just see what you're getting live off the camera. So, you know, Tethered build, it's not perfect. You don't have a live view. I have to take a picture each time. I can't just like go in and model it all live. But for a free solution, it is excellent. So there you have it. We went in the studio and did a basic, very inexpensive setup to do some tethered shooting. We used a very low-end Nikon, and then I used the Tethered Build app. Now, one thing I want to add is the Tethered Build app is Mac only. And if you're interested in downloading it, the URL put below, it's tetheredbuildapp.com. And once this, again, it's Mac only and Nikon only. There are other solutions if you're on a Windows machine or if you're not shooting Nikon. Canon has some great software that a lot of their cameras come with. And Nikon also has their own solutions that you know, are available for purchase. Like I said, this app isn't perfect. It's missing live view and some things like that. But for you know, basically a setup that'll run you under $500 plus the computer, it's pretty amazing what you can do with it. So anyway, once again, this has been The Art of Photography. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.